Happy Hump Day, everybody. Welcome to episode 29 of Stir Crazy, the place on the YouTubes where we talk real shit about the news. Brought to you, of course, by the Real News Network. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Coming up on today's program, boys and girls, what does it mean to believe women? Joe Biden said that he believed the allegations made by Christine Blasey Ford against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. However, he denies firmly the allegations that Tara Reade is making against him. And some are even calling for Biden to be replaced on the ticket because of these allegations. So, what does it mean? Not just for liberals and progressives, but for all of us. When we say that we believe survivors, does it mean that action needs to come after that, or are we still in the listening phase? We're going to get into that discussion. Also, coming up, in the middle of a pandemic, more and more states are cutting Medicaid. Sounds like a brilliant idea, right? As we have 30 million people now unemployed, most people's healthcare is tied to their jobs. Sure, why not cut one of the final social safety nets in place while the pandemic is still raging across this country? We're going to get into some details about that. Also, guess who's back? Big Bad Bernie. See, I was trying to flow. My flow got messed up. But Big Bad Bernie Sanders back on the New York State ticket after a federal judge rules that the New York State primary must go on. We have some details coming up regarding that as well. Of course, we always love to hear from you in the chat and in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I said like and subscribe, people. Hit them buttons, both of them. Don't play games with me. And we're going to get into this conversation, bringing in our fantastic panel today. I was trying to think of a famous quartet who we could be today, and I'm thinking we could be Rage Against the Machine. So I'm gonna be Tom. I'm gonna be Tom Morello on the guitar, doing crazy shit with the guitar. Yes, indeed. But I'd like to bring in our fantastic panel. Joining us today from New York is activist and organizer Jesse Myerson, founder of, or one of the founding members of Baltimore's Chinatown Collective, Leandro Lagera, and visual producers here at The Real News, Andrew Corkery. Gang, thank you all for being here. We are raging against the machine today, are we not?
Indeed, thank you.
Well, who's gonna be who? I'm Tom. Who's
I'm Zach. I'm Zach.
Those are the only two members of Rage Against the Machine who I know their name. So you could just assign me the other two.
It's okay. Leandro, you can be Brad. You can be Brad Vilk, and then you can be Jesse. You can be Tim Comerford.
I actually played the drums in middle school, so.
No, Brad Wilk, badass on them drums, baby.
Exactly.
Leandro, you should be glad to be Brad today. Gang, I wanted to start off with the news that Bernie Sanders has been reinstated on the New York Democratic primary ballot. According to a federal judge, the primary must go on. I believe it's going to take place in June. And Bernie, along with other presidential candidates who have since dropped out of the race, will be added on the ballot. Jesse, I know you live in New York. This news definitely impacts you, but could have some rippling effects for the Sanders campaign going forward because, you know, Bernie's still adding up delegates, it would seem.
Yeah, I saw he just got 20-something% in Kansas the other day. Like, I don't know any other presidential candidate who can drop out and endorse the other guy and still pass the delegate threshold. That's crazy. Yeah, I'm glad that he's back on the ballot in New York. I already voted for him. I did early voting. And so it would have been a real shame if that hadn't gotten counted. I do think that like the main purpose behind Cuomo trying to get him off the ballot really didn't have to do with Sanders. It had to do with hurting other more down ballot progressive and leftist challengers. Obviously the left has been quite successful in New York in the last couple of election cycles. And I think Cuomo can't abide that and is just waging war on the left, waging war on the Working Families Party and DSA and all of the other forces in New York that are trying to revamp the Democratic Party so it's no longer Cuomo's pretty much right-wing party. So that was very, very good news for a lot of the down ballot candidates who this was really going to hurt. And yeah, I don't know that his Cuomo can't be rebuffed too many times. And for on one day for Cuomo and Biden to get bad news, that was a good day for me. I will say that it's interesting that Andrew Yang brought the federal lawsuit that resulted in this. And there's a lot of speculation that he is gearing up to run for mayor of New York. which honestly, whatever, the more the merrier, I guess.
Andrew, what's your take about Bernie being re-added? And I'm looking at the latest delegate count. So as it stands now, Joe Biden has over 1,400 delegates. Bernie Sanders just shy of 1,000. I mean, I know Bernie has dropped out of the race. It's not likely that he's going to continuing to be the Democratic nominee. But damn, homie, if you're still getting delegates, people still coming out there and voting for you, you kind of got to keep hope alive a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a bit problematic because, all of the states that were kind of organized earlier in the subject to different primaries kind of leaned a lot more conservative than some of the other states that would have voted later on. So, it's kind of about seeing how it would work out in the long term. But at the same time, I think Bernie has a very sort of robust calculus when it comes to understanding what he thinks that he has to do in order to try to stop Trump. And so, I think he really kind of pushed a lot in this second time around in 2020, going for the the Democratic nomination. But obviously, the powers that be are still at play when it comes to ultimately subverting the will of the voters in multiple ways. And then there was just fundamental things that were wrong with Bernie's campaign in terms of outreach to the Black community, especially in the South, and kind of different failures to organize on a critical level that could have impacted his chances a lot more and given him a way more robust shot at finally getting the Democratic nomination. So I think it's a bit of a mixed bag, but I do think it's good that New York has decided to kind of put him back on, because it shows that there are still some semblance of instruments in place to preserve democracy when the kind of people demand it, and also when Bernie has such a large amount of delegates like you just outlined.
Leandro, what is your take? Because some speculate that if Bernie Sanders is allowed to remain on the ballot for some of these remaining Democratic primary contests, that inevitably it will hurt Joe Biden, because, as Jesse pointed out in Kansas recently, Bernie got 20% of the electorate there. If he is siphoning off a fifth or better of the Democratic primary vote, that doesn't maybe bode that well for Biden come November, because people don't believe in this candidate really.
I mean, I'm all for Bernie getting more delegates and have more leverage during the convention. And if you are a presumptive Democratic nominee and you can't beat a guy who's already dropped out of a race, then maybe you should rethink your campaign. So, thoughts about this potentially hurting Biden's campaign, I think they'll adjust to it. He's got the whole Democratic machine backing him. And, I know he's been terrible during this whole COVID crisis, but, the thing I like most about this is that they're instituting New York's right to vote again. I think canceling the primary really started like a slippery slope that the Republicans can take advantage of in the general election, saying that, some of these elections are foregone conclusions. If we take Cuomo's logic to its logical endpoint, is why don't we just have Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, and another battleground in Virginia vote in the general election, because all the other states are pretty much not contested. So I do like the fact that they're giving back New York its right to vote, even though it's pretty much a foregone conclusion who's going to win. But I'm all for Bernie getting more delegates and have more leverage. And if Biden is nominee, if you can't beat Bernie now, where Bernie's kind of giving up, so he should rethink his campaign.
Speaking
I also
of
think it underscores the Electoral College too, real quick. Just the lunacy of this Electoral College system that we currently have is definitely, underscored in what Leandro just outlined. The fact that, basically we're leaving the entire election up to 5 or 6 states, and the other, 45 to 44 states are completely and utterly inconsequential in the current juxtaposition of the system that we have right now. And so I think that's a much larger detail and flaw that needs to be fleshed out even more as we kind of continue on covering, the 2020 election.
I think that's a great point, Andrew. And the Supreme Court right now is hearing arguments about a case involving the Electoral College. That's something we're going to talk about tomorrow on Stir Crazy, so to be sure to come on back for that. But Leandro said that Joe Biden has the full faith and confidence of the Democratic establishment and the Democratic machine, and that was proved correct once again, I should say, by the endorsement of former Attorney General Eric Holder for Joe Biden. Now, what's interesting about this endorsement is that Eric Holder says that Joe Biden is going to be a maverick of sorts for criminal justice reform. And, it really got me to thinking, like, so the people that you that you invite over to like fix something in your house and they fuck it up, right? You're going to invite them back over to come fix it again. Like Joe Biden could single-handedly almost be the person responsible, in part. At least he can take a good share of the credit for how fucked up our criminal justice system is now, simply because of his passage of the 1994 crime bill, which he championed and heralded and even wanted to call it the Joe Biden crime bill. I'm not impressed with this. Eric Holder, I think, is a person of high personal achievements, but his job as Attorney General during the Obama administration was a little bit shaky, in my opinion, for a couple of specific reasons. I'll get into that a little later, but I wanted to turn it over to you guys. What are your thoughts about Eric Holder endorsing Joe Biden? Certainly not a surprise, Jesse, but at the same time, I mean, Eric Holder, did we need this? Like, did we need to hear from you on this particular election?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's at this point, Biden's the only Democrat running, so I firmly expect all the Democrats to be endorsing him. And of course, like that means since Joe Biden has staked out his position in the Democratic Party as being on its right wing for decades now, and in fact has often, especially during the crime bill, staked out positions to the right of the Republican Party as a way of like showing them up that he's tougher than they are. It means that a lot of the Democratic Party that is now endorsing him has been on the opposite side of a lot of issues. We saw Elizabeth Warren endorse him. He's now apparently going to move forward her bankruptcy bill reforms that she's proposing, when of course it was his bankruptcy bill that she's proposing to reform. Same with the crime bill, the Iraq war. His record, really none of the things that he's done in his life, except maybe the Violence Against Women Act, which was included in the crime bill and which now that he's embroiled in this scandal, even that comes under question. But yeah, apart from that, his whole record is quite right wing. And so to have the Democratic Party endorsing him means a lot of people either going back on what they said or showing faith that that he's not going to act in line with his record, which is a real pity. But it seems like that's what they feel like they have to do if they want to beat Trump. It puts them in a really difficult rhetorical position. Rebecca Traister had a good piece in The Cut on the bind that women politicians are now put in because he's facing these allegations and they are coalescing around him. And so you have all of these women politicians who are now constantly between now and November going to be asked to be shields for Joe Biden, and it puts them in a terrible position. They've got to do it because it's their party and they want to beat Trump, and yet it goes against so much of what they have said in public around the Christine Blasey Ford, Brett Kavanaugh allegations, and many other things. And it's a real bind, and it certainly does lessen Joe Biden's chances of beating Trump in November. How many mental and rhetorical calisthenics the Democratic Party are going to have to do.
Leandro, I feel like Joe Biden's, campaign slogans are along the lines of vote for me for president. I'll fix all the shit I fucked up when I was in the Senate for 35 years.
I mean, like, if you use that logic, Kim, we keep electing Republicans in office and keep letting them fuck up the country every 4 to 8 years. So, I mean, it's not like the American electorate isn't aware of what they're doing. I mean, I think if anything, Joe Biden is a politician. At the time when the crime bill was introduced, that's what people wanted, and he's starting to read the tea leaves again and seeing what people want. And I don't think he's passionate about any of these positions, but I think he's doing the calculus to see what happens or how he could win. And ultimately, it's probably a good thing that he's become more progressive I mean, like, right, like he has fucked up this country badly, and he'll have to answer to that, after he's out of office. But for now, I think like if he's moving a little bit more left instead of being conservative, then I think it's an advantage for us in general. But I'm only saying this because we don't necessarily have a choice besides Joe Biden at this point. So, the election's in November. Bernie's probably not going to pull off like an upset win, and they're probably not going to replace their candidate. So, the more Biden moves left, potentially it could be the more beneficial for us, because we don't know what he's going to do in office, and he could just be trying to appease progressives like Warren and Bernie and such, and talking about how he's a changed man or a new man, or he doesn't remember like that bill was bad or whatever. But like, maybe it's a good thing that he's moving towards this direction. Maybe that he's only going to last 4 more years. So,
Andrew, I feel like Joe Biden is a lot like the coronavirus in the sense that I've tried to social distance from all Joe Biden news, all Joe Biden affiliations, and yet here he comes showing up. I wash my hands 10, 15, 20 times. Joe Biden still fucking there. He's going to be with us in November, just like the coronavirus. Can't seem to get rid of him, but he's the best that we've got to offer right now, or at least the best that we have to choose from.
And his ass is mutating just like the coronavirus is too at this point. So I mean, basically, I think Leandro raised some really key points there, but I do think that we're kind of talking about him making concessions to the progressives or to the left, and I think that in him doing that, it's on the left to a certain degree to keep his feet to the fire, like once he does get into office. Because unlike Trump, I do think that Biden, to a certain extent, can be moved on certain issues for political expediency, and also just due to the fact that there will be sheer uprisings if he doesn't. So, in terms of a political calculus, we have to make it very clear to him as the left that, if certain things aren't accomplished, if Green New Deal kind of isn't brought to bear and we aren't looking at the climate crisis seriously, if we're not looking at criminal justice reform seriously, then his ass is going to be out in 4 years. So, and he's going to be a one-term president. And, the ground that he's on, that middle ground that he claims to be on, is only going to make the right wing stronger, because once he starts making compromises and once he starts saying that, we're going to make deals with the Republicans and we're going to heal our country and all this other bullshit that he keeps saying on the campaign trail, it's going to be really problematic, because you're going to have a situation where if the left isn't responding to what he's doing and forcing him to move to the left, you're going to have a situation where he presents a deal and it's like a center right, if not just flat out right wing deal on criminal justice reform, on climate change. And that's not going to bode well for any of the structural issues that we're trying to fundamentally fix in our society. And if anything, the right's just going to turn around and say, well, we didn't get enough compromise out of Biden. We want actual full-on, neo-fascism. Like, come on, Biden, why don't you move further to the right? So I think that, we need to kind of take that calculus into consideration and just keep his feet to the fire. I think that's the main thing, and see what concessions we can tangibly get out in terms of policy.
Well, that's something I think Bernie Sanders has articulated that is part of his strategy, I would assume, for, I guess, allowing his name to remain on the ballot of some of these remaining Democratic primary contests, because, the more Bernie delegates are in the mix, then hopefully they can use that as leverage to get some of the things that you outlined, Andrew, as part of Biden's platform. But you touched on something that is so important that scares me about the potential of a Joe Biden administration, is that this constant capitulation and wanting to work with, reach across the aisle. I mean, he bragged about his relationship with, known prominent segregationists like Strom Thurmond during his time in the Senate. And it's like, I don't want the person I'm voting for to be cool with fucking Strom Thurmond. You understand what I'm saying? So, I mean, like that really bothers me, because he's such a compromiser, but to the detriment of people who tend to vote Democrat. And that's what I'm concerned about as it relates to Joe Biden. Now, I know Trump, of course, is a bigger existential threat, but my God, if someone is just willing to compromise us to death, it's death by 1,000 cuts, so to speak.
Well, I also just don't rule out real quick that, Trump leaves for 4 years and Biden comes in and he just causes complete pandemonium and havoc while he's outside of the White House and then just gets reelected again 4 years later. I mean, I don't rule that out. And I know that sounds crazy given how old he is. But this is the problem with these neoliberal centrist Democrats is like they constantly focus on incremental change, and the incremental change can't catch up fast enough with the needs of the electorate for dealing with these issues substantially. So they keep on ceding this ground to the right wing. And, who knows? Trump could go away and we could get someone even worse than Trump. But at the same time, Trump is, he is a total existential threat to the human race at this point in time. I just don't see any other way to characterize it at this point.
I mean, hopefully, the quarantine, the coronavirus is teaching Democrats that incremental change won't work. Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah.
I'll stop. Jesse is shaking his head.
The thing about Biden is that maybe uniquely among Democrats, he's not into compromising with Republicans. He's actually into staking out positions to the right of Republicans. Like if you read Ryan Grimm's work at The Intercept on how the crime bill got done, it wasn't because the Republicans were proposing things to the right and Joe Biden kind of gave into them. He staked out positions to their right. This is also true on, I think just to be really grim, coronavirus obviously is necessitating a large amount of deficit spending, and Republicans are always totally happy to do deficit spending. They don't care about the deficit. They don't care about the debt. They're happy to give tax breaks and start wars and do all of the Republican things to entrench hierarchy and enrich the wealthy, whatever it costs, without ever raising taxes. And then, of course, as soon as a Democrat comes into office, suddenly they care about the deficit again. And the thing is that they dupe most of the Democrats into doing it. And I've already seen, I think Ben Rhodes, Obama's speechwriter, wrote a thing recently talking about how what the amount of spending we're doing now is going to necessitate some cuts later on. So they're already setting up for austerity. And obviously the right wing, with, including neoliberal Democrats, have over the last several decades already obliterated most of the public sector. They're going after the Postal Service now. But the main thing that there still is that they can privatize is Social Security. And of course, as Senator Sanders made the case again and again in his run for president, Joe Biden has repeatedly over the last decades sided with them on that issue. In fact, said that Paul Ryan had the right idea, that we should be freezing Social Security. And actually, I think Biden would have an easier time getting Social Security cut than Trump would, because he would not excite the opposition of the Democrats. He would get a number of Democrats to go along with it. So that's really dark. Obviously, I agree that Trump is the biggest existential threat, but I think that a Biden presidency would not just be compromising with Republicans, but really entrenching their values and their policy ideas.
Yeah, that's what his record indicates. We have some comments from the comments. Bald Eagle says it's all about pushing policy/agenda. Schultzy 100 says, I don't know. I feel like we're on black ice and the steering's going out, and it's going to be hard to make that exit. If we don't, though, end times, I guess. We have a lot of comments, actually. Hold on, guys. This is from 206 War Eagle. We know you. He's a friend of the show. They say progressives/indies should use whatever is left of the Sanders campaign carcass as a crash test dummy, so for whatever we can get out of it. Well, Joe Biden is working hard on his campaign. Obviously, you can't get out and canvass and rally the way that you would under normal circumstances. The fact that we're in a pandemic is pushing Joe Biden to the web to do some interesting things. Let's take a look at what Joe Biden's been up to in the interim.
Keegan, do you have any threes?
No, I don't. Do you have any nines?
Yeah. I always start with dessert.
Is the name Maurice funnier than Martin?
I like Maurice.
One R. Yeah, don't try too hard.
Working on a speech that I'm going to need you to deliver.
We should try to find a place for the word loquacious. 41 down, comedy duo Key and Blank. How many E's in Peel?
3. 3 E's in Peel. 3.
It's 13.
Come on, Keegan, you can do 20. Keegan, I do everything 46 these days.
That's 20.
Do 30, Keegan, 30. 10 more.
Come on, Joe.
30. Pretty good, man.
Yeah, is that nice?
Pretty good. I'm still working on my sunglasses.
But Joe, I got to get going.
Where are you going? You're quarantined. You can't go anywhere. We're in quarantine.
Yep, you're right. You're right.
Keegan, do you have any 3s?
I do, Joe. Yes, I do.
Now, who in the hell is that supposed to be appealing to, gang? I mean, I look at that and I'm like, Joe Biden, that's a little silly, kitschy kind of thing that does not rise to the level of seriousness that we are dealing with as a country on a variety of major fronts. And it's cool that Keegan-Michael Key is down for Biden, I suppose. But at the same time, I mean, come on, bro. Like, this is not even funny. I think that could be its greatest sin right there. It is not even laugh worthy. Let's go around the horn here. Jesse, what's your take on Joe Biden being cool Uncle Joe, posting cool videos online? Hey guys, I'm in here quarantined with the rest of you.
Well, I mean, I think it speaks to his theory of what coalition he's trying to put together. Obviously, Bernie Sanders was trying to put together a coalition of the broad multiracial working class, people who are struggling to get by, who resonate with the message of universal health care and a jobs guarantee and eliminating college debt. Joe Biden is not interested in those people. And so he's not putting forward any kind of program that speaks to their needs. He's not talking about how we're going to recover economically, how we're going to do public health retrofits that are necessary to bring us up to speed on this thing. Who he's campaigning to is the people who really gave him the edge in the primary, which is affluent suburbanites. Because the working class are still working. They're going out and doing deliveries and doing laundry and serving food and working in grocery stores and tending to people in nursing homes and hospitals. They're still out there working. The people who are quarantined at home doing a bunch of crosswords and yucking it up and calling a friend, that's like more affluent people are doing that. And that's mostly not people of color. It seems to be that that's his theory, as it was Secretary Clinton's theory of who was going to put her over the edge in 2016. To me, it doesn't seem like a very, very sharp theory, especially because Trump's main base of support is also affluent suburbanites. But that's who he's going for. And it speaks to them. There's nothing about policy. It's all about personality. And that's really what appeals to them, because they're not actually struggling in this moment. They may be scared. They may hate how Trump is so anti-science and is going around the Honeywell plant with no mask on, just like fucking around and being an idiot. But they're not. They don't hunger for the transformative change that the working class does. And that's how they gave Biden the nomination. And he's hoping that that's how it's going to put him over the top in the general.
Leandro, go ahead.
I mean, I have two thoughts about that. One is, how does Joe Biden have better picture quality than an actual entertainer on Zoom? And two, we've seen this playbook, right? Like, Joe Biden is best friends with a safe, accessible, famous black dude. I mean, it's his playbook for years now. So no surprise here.
Okay, listen, Sam is lighting it up in the comments. Sam said, I'm cringing so hard right now as he was watching that video. And he says that this video appeals, this is the elderly white millionaire who watches MSNBC would love that video of Joe Biden and Keegan-Michael Key. Andrew, go ahead, Andrew. Just go ahead.
Yes.
I mean, my God, does Bill Clinton's saxophone, is it hiding in the closet? Can somebody dust that off? Is he going to start playing saxophone on Arsenio Hall now? Like, come on, dog.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like, he's trying to, your Bill Clinton saxophone, parallel is very apt in the situation. But also, I feel like Biden thinks he's somehow in a time machine where he can become Obama and then just go on in between two ferns with Zach Galifianakis and, talk about all sorts of crazy shit. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just really problematic. Like Jesse kind of laid out, it shows exactly who he's going for, and it shows that he has no real intention of appropriately formulating a policy and or a reach out campaign to progressives, and that, you know, the people that watch MSNBC and the people that watch CNN and the upper middle class, you know, white suburbanites are who he's going to try to influence, because as bad as the quarantine is for everyone, they're certainly not getting the brunt of it as much as, you know, people who are going out and like working at grocery stores, or, you know, some of the nurses in the community. And so, you know, the idea that we kind of all have to stay inside also doesn't ring true to all these working class people that were part of the Sanders coalition, that broad multiracial working class coalition that was looking at you know, a more equitable society and how to influence that and how to create that through systemic changes in policy. So this video, I mean, maybe we're just setting too high of a bar for it. But again, I think that's the whole problem with Biden in this moment, is that he doesn't really rise to the occasion of dealing with the level of severity that has been presented to us, whether it comes from a social safety policy net perspective, or whether it comes from, you know, a pandemic response perspective. He's not rising to the occasion.
From the comments, Black Magic says, great. We get either full racist / rapist with 45 or racist / rapist light with Biden. Yay! And that is pretty much the extent of our choices here as we head towards November. But, you know, a lot of people are saying that despite Joe Biden's flaws and his problems and his issues and his baggage, they're going to vote for Joe Biden anyway. And one of those people is attorney Lisa Bloom. Now, Lisa Bloom is famous for well, first of all, she's Gloria Allred's daughter, so she's a little less famous than her mama. But she has stood up for victims of sexual assault and sexual abuse sometimes, because this was also the same chick who was trying to go against, was it either Rose McGowan or Alyssa Milano? It was Rose McGowan, right? Trying to discredit her in her allegations against Harvey Weinstein. But this is the tweet that she put up. Let's take a look at that, Dwayne, because a lot of people on the Democratic side are echoing these sentiments. Lisa Bloom tweeted, "I believe you, Tara Reid. You have people who remember that you told them about this decades ago. We know that he is, quote, handsy. You're not asking for money. You obviously struggled mightily with this. I still have to fight Trump, so I will support Joe. But I believe you, and I'm sorry." And she's getting a lot of flack for that, understandably. And gang, there was a piece in Vox recently that talked about what it means to believe women and to believe sexual allegations, especially as we are, I guess, post Me Too at this point, not fully out of the Me Too movement, I hope, because it was so important that it even began and gained mainstream traction in the first place. But a lot of people are justifying Trump being worse than Biden in order to sort of massage over these allegations that Tara Reid made. And like Lisa Bloom said, she's not asking for money. I think most people would agree that women and people who are victims of sexual assault or sexual abuse, you know, they don't really have it easy when they come out and publicly accuse powerful people. It comes along with death threats. It comes with harassment, people being doxxed, people being stalked. It's not a walk in the park to accuse a powerful person of having harmed you in some way. So I wanted to go around and ask you guys, you know, ask you guys specifically, because I do think it's important that we get the perspective of men in these days. And Jesse, I'm going to start with you because, you know, there was not like a formal investigation, like police did not investigate Tara Reid's allegations. But at the same time, that is the case for a lot of sexual assaults. Most of them do go unreported and are not investigated by police. But for some reason, people want to lay the law enforcement like as the bar that needs to be met in order for allegations to be taken as credible or legitimate.
And often when they are investigated by police, the victims are gaslit and dismissed and sometimes punished. I mean, there is no, and Title IX is obviously such a catastrophe. There is no good way for women who've been sexually assaulted to come forward with these allegations. I'll say that I think maybe this will be controversial. I think Lisa Bloom's position is the most respectable one, which is to say, these are credible, I believe her, and I'm going to vote for him anyway. That's a much more respectable position. It's a confession of a real internal struggle, but it's much more respectable than what Gillibrand and the rest of them have done, which said, I believe Joe Biden. Before Joe Biden had even said anything in public, they said they believed him. That to me is much more weaselly than saying, yeah, I mean, that's disgusting. I believe you. I think you're probably right that he did that, but we have to beat Trump. I mean, it's not a powerful message, obviously, to campaign on, but I do think that it's much more respectable, and I wish more people were taking that line rather than just saying we believe Joe Biden and not Tara Reade. I mean, the thing about the line on the Believe Women shorthand that I like most came from Katie McDonough, who wrote at Jezebel, I think, or maybe this was at Splinter, that really Believe Women is not a literal statement that women can't lie, or that like women are somehow perfect, innocent angels, and we should always believe everything they say. It's an intervention into a system that systematically, reflexively disbelieves women. And so what it really means is don't reflexively disbelieve women. Take their allegations very seriously and listen to them and investigate them and provide avenues for redress. I think Tara Reade has been struggling to find a way to get her allegations taken seriously in a way that she wouldn't if her assailant had been a Republican. And so, yeah, I do think like it's important to take women seriously when they bring forward these allegations, and not to take Believe Women as an injunction to believe that all women are telling the truth all the time. In fact, I think that's quite a sexist position to be like, women are perfect angels who can't lie. Like, for instance, my radar especially gets set off when white women accuse black men of sexual indiscretion, because we have a long legacy in this country of false allegations against black men for violence against white women, and white women being mobilized as their victimhood being mobilized as a pretext for white male-dominated society to imprison more black men. So that's just, obviously Joe Biden is not Medgar Evers, he's not the Scottsboro Boys, but I do think that there is cause not to take Believe Women as an injunction to always believe all women all the time. I do think that we need to take allegations seriously, and I think that Lisa Bloom, unfortunately, is one of the few people in this case who actually has done that.
Yeah, I think that that message that you kind of outlined there, Jesse, is correct, and especially when it comes to sort of the political ramifications that the Democratic Party is going to be faced with. When people like Gillibrand and other people kind of come out and say that they believe Biden immediately, because I think it just presents an inherent conflict, and it presents a sort of this perception of the Democrats not equating different allegations equally and looking into them equally, and allows the Republicans to continue on this ground that they're on, which is that we're not going to play by your rules. For example, when Roy Moore, was accused by all these different women of, sexual assault and all these different things that he committed, 20, 30, 40 years ago before his Senate run in Alabama, Democrats rightfully came out and said that these are wrongful, these are allegations that need to be taken seriously, and that we believe that he did this stuff. And they did the same thing when Kavanaugh was accused by Christine Blasey Ford. And so to come out and say that you don't believe Tara Reade because Biden is the nominee just seems like an action of political expediency, and then allows the Republicans to make the argument that Democrats are just using this as a political wedge issue when it applies to them and when they want to enact it, as opposed to a moral arc that should be followed regardless of who's committing the action.
Debate time between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is going to be you're a coochie grabber. No, you're a coochie grabber. No, you grab more coochie than me. Like it's just going to be it's just going to dissolve in a finger pointing thing when basically both of them have enough faults and problems when it comes to dealing with women in subordinate positions that there's a lot of fingers that could be pointed in both directions on that debate stage.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, be right.
I think like I agree with Jesse's point that Lisa Bloom is taking the most courageous and right stance about this, and we knew this was going to happen, even without knowing the Tara Reade accusations going forward. I mean, there's bound to be some sort of skeleton in Joe Biden's closet, but like the Democrats made the choice that they'd rather win than rather have upstanding moral character or even policy choices. And when they chose Biden over Bernie, I mean, essentially when they elected Biden or will elect Biden to be the presumptive nominee, they chose the strategy of winning at all costs. So they're all kind of stuck in kind of the same bucket right now where they had to support Biden. I mean, I'll say one thing. I mean, Lindsey fucking Graham is defending Biden in the Tara Reade accusations. Lindsey Graham, of all people. So I think, what I am also most concerned about is that if they're going to scrutinize Biden for this allegation, and there's still a lot more things that need to come out because you learn new facts about this every day. Then they need to keep the spotlight on Trump and his accusations, and they need to keep the spotlight on Justice Kavanaugh. And unfortunately, if they do that, that's going to be top of mind during any of these debates, Kim. I mean, damn any sort of policy debate, any other things, then it's going to be like, how do you treat women? And both sides will lose when the debate turns that way.
Well said, Leandro. In the comments, John Koister says, I'm going to vote for Biden anyway, is the most exciting campaign slogan I've never heard, is what John said. Yeah, that is pretty much the slogan these days, isn't it, John? Also in the comments, Vegas 831, worst mud wrestling contest ever in a Biden v. Trump debate. Agreed there. And also in the comments, oh, come on, phone, flip correctly. This is from Steely Steve. Steely Steve says, Joe Biden not held accountable while Al Franken was ran right up out of office. Yep. Well, somebody had better timing, I guess. Moving along in the conversation, gang, obviously we're still dealing with the effects of corona virus, COVID-19 pandemic. Over 1.2 million Americans have tested positive. We are at 70,000 deaths, give or take, over the course of about 3 months, which is a horrible milestone for the United States to achieve at this point in time. The country is beginning to reopen in certain parts, places more open than others. But we are engaged in a war of words with China, as Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is talking big shit about China, saying that the virus escaped from a Wuhan laboratory, and Trump is like, China needs to pay. And China said, we are sick of this shit. Y'all need to cut that nonsense out. Big time Chinese ambassador has warned the United States that blaming the Chinese for this pandemic is simply going to make it worse. And I don't really know what the outcome, the end game is here for the United States to lay all these accusations at China. I'm not really sure what can be done about it at this point. But gentlemen, what is your take on this emerging diplomatic row, if you will, with the Chinese? I mean, we've had trade wars with them under Trump. It's not been a good relationship with the Chinese during the Trump administration. And obviously we need to work in some sort of cohesive fashion to address the pandemic. So should we be beefing with China right now is the question, Andrew.
Yeah, so I think that we kind of have to separate this concept into two different ideas, which is China does things that are bad and deserve to be, condemned for them. And then there's the US using things that China does bad, or kind of making up stuff in addition to the stuff that China does that's bad, to make the United States look better and to use it as a political wedge against China, who owns our debt. So basically, I think that, we need to make that distinction when talking about China, and also realize that there's a lot of history to this too. I mean, in terms of Red Scaring and all of these different issues that relate to China and how China deals with policy when it comes to public health and other things of that nature. So I think that, the Trump administration obviously knows that the more they reflexively, blame China, the less, in theory, the American people will blame them, is basically their calculation. So their idea is to constantly ratchet up the ante when it comes to dealing with China, and to foist as much blame onto China as humanly possible to try to save themselves, politically, and present the United States with an alternative reality in which they've handled this crisis in a positive manner.
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I applaud Andrew for being so delicate about it, but I still view it as being racist as fuck. I think this is within the Trump administration playbook, that they continue to blame the other, whether it's China or someone from the Middle East, etc. But it is something that plays to Trump's base. They don't necessarily understand or care to understand the delicacy of the difference between a government and its policies and the government and its people. I mean, this is a simplified, dumbed down message of be afraid of the other. They create viruses. They create all sorts of bad things, and Trump administration will protect you from it. I will point out, though, that the coronavirus has been proven to have mutated from China, and the more deadly, more infectious, more contagious coronavirus mutation comes from Italy. So I liken it to the Italians stealing noodles from the Chinese and just going with it, putting it on steroids. So they should talk about how the coronavirus has mutated. The strain that is currently affecting the East Coast is from Italy, and then the mutation is it's become a lot more spiky, so it sticks to your lungs a lot more. So again, it's kind of misleading, still blaming China for all these things, but again, it's fucking racist. I mean, it's the Trump administration, as expected.
Yeah, and I think the end game there is war. Really, yeah. I mean, you had trade war, and now we're basically casting coronavirus as a Chinese invasion, and yeah, that's a good political gambit for the right to just deflect responsibility by ratcheting up racist scapegoating and militating toward war. It's it always works, and Joe Biden's happy to play that game and happy to wage a contest with Trump over who's tougher on China. I'll also say that this plays to the Chinese government's strengths as well. I mean, we're talking about two right-wing nationalist governments that get to stoke anger at one another in order to undermine the popular democratic movements in their own countries fighting for justice there. It seems quite likely to me that it will just escalate and escalate. And if we don't go to full-scale war, I wouldn't be surprised if we were right on the brink of war as November rolled around.
Jesus, Jesse, that sucks.
That's how they do. That's their playbook. That's how they do.
I mean, that's what they did with Iran. So, I mean, why not just do it with China? But the problem is they don't recognize that, China is not a third-rate geopolitical power like Iran is. So you're going to have a much heavier duty in trying to ramp up war and take that back from the edge than you are with Iran, as terrible as ratcheting up war with Iran is.
Totally. And they can, just to be clear, they can do this with very little actual movement. They can just wage war in the media. I don't know if you remember in 2018, the midterms, every day for a month leading up to that. Do you remember what the news story was in the right-wing press? It was the caravan of migrants coming from Central America every fucking day. And literally the day after the election, you didn't hear anything about it because it was just a complete fabric. It's a wag the dog thing. You're like, how can we portray America as being invaded by people who are not white? And that's how they Democrats won a bunch of places in Virginia and California in the suburbs, but they lost a bunch of marquee Senate races in 2018 on the strength of that bullshit lie.
I hate it here. I swear, sometimes I hate it here.
Some people might call it a shithole country.
Yeah, just maybe.
Some people might be right there, Jesse. So, gang, I didn't realize how deep in the hour that we were, and there's a couple more stories I definitely want to get to. But Leandro, I know you pitched a story about how other countries are handling coronavirus way better than us. I mean, beyond flattening the curve, they are actually seeing their infections and deaths go down. Talk to us about who in the world is doing coronavirus way better than us.
I mean, there's several countries, Vietnam, Slovenia, which is pretty great because it's right beside Italy, Jordan, etc. They have varying degrees of kind of the same policies that have been recommended to the United States. Vietnam did a ton of testing. They quarantined a ton of people. People went in, they self-isolated and such. Jordan had a much more detailed plan additionally where they planned out which hospitals will take care of coronavirus patients and which won't. And so people can get proper health care. Most of these countries have pretty robust healthcare systems. Slovenia closed off its borders right away within 2 weeks. And I think the common theme, the common thread, especially after watching all the pictures you saw this past weekend, where it was a beautiful weekend, and you saw all the people out, in DC and Baltimore and New York, et cetera, the common thread was the populace actually believed its health officials. So, when they told them you had to stay home for 14 days and not see anyone else, the populace believed it. Vietnam is not a country rich with resources or money, but yet the populace believed what they said. They developed a vaccine right away. Not a vaccine, sorry. They developed testing right away. They showed where the priority should be in combating a virus like this, and they're reaping the rewards of that. In the United States, we can't follow anything. So I think, the most important part is that people have to believe that this is a true crisis, and at least 30 to 40% of our population does not, including the administration.
There's also
Andrew,
people that think that there's an alternative reality for what the crisis actually is, which is that the government is using this as a wedge issue to keep people inside and like subvert control, and the fact that there's not actually a virus, which is what all these right-wing protesters believe. But anyway, Kim, you were saying, sorry.
No, what I'm saying is it appears as though we are the only country full of stupid shits who have people out there rallying in the middle of this pandemic. I spoke with a couple of guests this week, one from the UK, one from Germany, and I asked them, I said, are you guys having this issue where people are clamoring for things to reopen? They said, hell no, everybody's in the house. This is a uniquely American thing, Jesse and Andrew, and the fact that we have such a disbelief in science and medicine and authority in some cases. It really, not only does it make us look stupid, I mean, we are stupid. We live in a dumb country, unfortunately. I'm sorry, Real News viewers, but we do live in a dumb country. Y'all know it.
Well, to me, the main issue isn't the dumbness or people's lack of adherence to science. It's the callousness. I mean, if you go on right-wing media, their talking point is like, well, how many people have died? Tens of thousands of people die from this, that, and the other every year. And they're right about that because tons of shit kills lots of people in this country because people don't care. That's an acceptable level of death. If this were the Black Plague and we were losing half to 2/3 of the population, maybe that would be different and people would be different. But tens of thousands of people dying is nothing to a lot of people because they're right. We do this to people all the time. Lack of health insurance kills that many people. The prison industrial complex kills that many people. Over-policing kills that many people. The climate crisis kills that many people. And forest fires and droughts. And I mean, the amount of death that Americans are willing to stomach as a result of our policy is way too high. And I think that's the main difference. I think you'll find people in all those countries who are stupid as shit and don't believe in science and whatever else. But I think in those places, they just haven't adjusted to the level of death that we're willing to inflict on our people.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, moving along, gang, because Obviously, our medical community is dealing with a tremendous amount of pressure and stress from lack of resources, and then having just to bear witness of the brutality of what coronavirus can do to patients and their families. It's been truly terrifying, and we know that there's a lot of hard work happening, working to find vaccines, et cetera. And but there's a case that happened here in the U.S., and then there's something that happened in Russia as well. But doctors, well, first of all, let's start here in America. In Pennsylvania, a young researcher working outside of Pittsburgh, he was working on coronavirus-related stuff, helping to identify the virus at a cellular level, where his research would hopefully go on to help, be the foundation laid for a vaccine or some sort of treatment. He was found shot to death under very mysterious circumstances. 37-year-old Bing Liu, according to NBCWashington.com, was a researcher at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, was found dead Saturday inside a home in Ross Township, just north of Pittsburgh, in Allegheny County. He had been shot in the head and the neck. Now, apparently there has been no motive released. Obviously, nobody has been arrested in connection with this. And I'm not trying to lay the foundation for conspiracy theories. However, it does seem very unusual that this person was murdered, given the time that we're in and what he was working on. But also in Russia, 3 doctors have now fallen out of windows. Okay. 2 of them have died. One of them is in critical condition. And the one doctor who did not survive his fall was, he had a video go viral recently where he was complaining about being forced to work during this pandemic and the lack of PPE that doctors in Russia are dealing with as well. So, gang, no, I mean, I don't believe that these incidents are linked at all. But given the fact that, we had a doctor from New York City, well, I think she died in Charlottesville, Virginia, and her name escapes me at the moment. But she ended up taking her own life because of the trauma and everything that she witnessed from having to treat COVID-19 patients. But I think the medical community is dealing with a lot more than I think is being acknowledged, or that people are willing to reach out and say that, hey, these people are under a tremendous amount of duress, and somehow people are losing their lives as a result.
And we get to paper that over by calling them heroes. And what that does is sets up a rhetorical world in which they are self-sacrificial. And so no matter what hardships befall them, that's seen as admirable because they're sacrificing themselves as heroes. And in that rhetorical world, we can just do flyovers from Blue Angels. We don't actually have to give them hazard pay or PPE or any of the things that they actually need. It's a really insidious way that we treat those people in this country.
I don't think it's that uncommon for people to fall out of windows in Russia if they complain about things. But my God, I mean, 3 in a very short amount of time, Andrew. I mean, you can't complain apparently in Russia, or they'll send them people to come get you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just gets to a larger problem in Russia with, Putin's control over the state, and, also kind of, it's a shame in some sense because I feel like because of the connection of the left, to Russia, and kind of like the history of McCarthyism and Red Scaring, like people on the left can't really have like a robust critique about like the Russian state and, the difficulties that happen in Russia due to, the very serious authoritarian policies of the president and the people around him. So I think one of the things is, from the research that I've been doing on this particular story, and there was a really good article actually about it in BuzzFeed, is that, like you said, a lot of these doctors, they're just not, people aren't believing them, and Putin's trying to control the numbers. There was a whole issue too where Russia was reporting, thousands and thousands of deaths as if they were pneumonia cases, and saying that they weren't part of coronavirus, when obviously this uptick in people getting pneumonia was directly related to coronavirus and needed to be reported to the World Health Organization and other entities that are tracking this as being coronavirus deaths. But the problem is they didn't want to present to the public and to the world that they were having an immense problem with it. And it only exacerbated the issue. And we're seeing that the doctors are having to deal with this crisis and the downfall of the policy of the Russian government in trying to contain this, in which they, just try to make it disappear. So,
I mean,
Leandro, you get the last word. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Russia was stuck with 199 deaths for like 8 weeks in the JH coronavirus.
Exactly.
So, I mean, none of this stuff coming out there is believable. I think, pushing your doctors out of windows is kind of self-defeating because you kind of need the doctors. So, I mean, that's pretty short-sighted on Russia's part. The Bing Liu story, though, is kind of frightening. I mean, he wasn't a doctor. He's a researcher that was on the verge of some sort of breakthrough. And, I don't know if I buy into the conspiracy theory, but they're blaming it on another Asian friend of his. So I don't know what that's about, but that's a terrifying story if we have researchers who are on the verge of a breakthrough for a coronavirus vaccine being assassinated. So I'll just leave that there.
Yeah. And just real quick on that, like, I think there was a really good article in The Guardian that came out kind of detailing the way in which the FBI describes like the anti-vaxxer movement and how they're really, really scared about the implications of what that movement could portend for how we deal with the coronavirus post getting a vaccine, and how that's going to dramatically affect like the amount of herd immunity that we have in our society, and how to deal with it both politically and legally, and how that's allowed to kind of fester in such a way and to not recognize like the physical and human challenge that's presented by people just flat out being anti-vaxxers. And it's not a problem that's unique to America, but it's definitely something that is exacerbated by the current political moment that we're living in America, where structural issues aren't solved through policy.
I will bring out one more thing for things or shit our doctors don't need. I was sent a picture on Saturday of a doctor who took a picture, and I'm glad Jesse mentioned this, who took a picture of Fells Point, which was full of people, and he was irate because it was full of people because the Blue Angels were about to fly over. So there's a doctor getting off his shift who lives in Fells Point, took a picture and sent to me, and he's furious at these people because of Blue Angels.
Yeah, it seems like an Orwellian Kafkaesque nightmare, honestly.
I hate it here. I hate it here. I hate it here. And if they say go back to Africa, please give me the first ticket. I'll be right there, Sean. I'll be right back in Africa, Coachella. Listen, gang, you guys have wasted another perfectly good hour by watching us here on Stir Crazy. Listen, I almost had an NPR flashback. I almost said Car Talk, right? You got to be of a way certain age to remember Car Talk on NPR. You wasted a perfectly good hour watching cars, listening to Car Talk. I'd like to thank our guests today, Jesse Myerson, Andrew Corkery, Leandro Lagera. As always, you guys coming through with a great opinions, perspective, and facts. Thank y'all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Hey, and thank all of you that were in the comments, in the chat. Again, love y'all, appreciate it. Hit like and subscribe. Like right now, damn it. You heard what I said. Like and subscribe. 2 buttons. We'll see y'all tomorrow on Stir Crazy. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Thank you for checking out this production of the Real News Network. Boop. Y'all have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.